In this unit, we are going to work on identifying 3D figures. There are two standards in this unit, 1.6b, supporting standard, and our readiness non-negotiable 1.6e standard. So both of these units are supported by the Kinder Standard K6b. And in that standard, students learn cone, sphere, cylinder, and cube. Those are the only 3D figures they're expected to know leaving kindergarten. So we want to make sure that we are not expecting things that were not part of their kindergarten standard. So they had to identify cone, sphere, cylinder, and cube. That's it. So they did talk about what shapes of the faces made up those figures. So that will help us when we're talking about the attributes. But they didn't have to do a whole lot else with those besides making sure they could identify those four figures as far as what supports our standards. Now, of course, they had to do other things with them, but as far as a direct support of the first grade standards, this is the prerequisite skill. So in 1.6b, our verb is distinguish. So what are we distinguishing? Well, this goes back to that same standard with the 2D figures. We're distinguishing attributes. And we're looking at ones that define and ones that do not define. Define the shape and do not define. So we're going to remember that when we're talking about attributes that do not define the shape, we're talking about color, size, and orientation. They do not define the shape. The things that do define the shape, the number of faces it has, the shape of the faces, the number of edges, the number of vertices, straight sides or curved sides. So those things are super important for us to make sure kids know. So attributes that define, number of faces, I'm going to say number and shape of faces, number of vertices, number of edges. Oh, I'm running right off the page. Let's slide this down a little bit. And whether it is, I might run out of room right here. Let me write it over here. Straight or curved faces. Almost ran out of room there. So let's talk about 1.6e a little bit, and then we'll come back and talk about it all together. So 1.6e, this is the identify standard for us. So it's got two parts, very similar to your 2D standard. You have two verbs. You have identify, and we identify the same figures as Kinder, but we add two prisms. So we identify these and rectangular prisms and triangular prisms. Okay, so they have 6 figures in first grade that they have to identify. But remember, this has two verbs. Our other verb is describe. And this is the describe with formal geometric language. Now, one of the tricky parts for this one is making sure that we are not allowing kids to use 2D language to describe a 3D figure. So, for example, in a 2D figure, I might say it has 4 sides. In 3D figures, I'm talking about the number of edges. One thing that we see kids struggle with, 2D is a square. 3D, this isn't a square, it's a cube. So they struggle a little bit with recognizing, This is made up of squares, but it is not a square. It is a cube. So we just have to really pay close attention to that vocabulary. So there are a few important things that I want to talk about. First of all, in almost every geometric manipulative set I've ever seen, it includes this figure. This is a pyramid. We don't do pyramid in first grade. We do prisms, but we do not do pyramids. So it's really important that you watch the resources that you use, manipulatives and print resources, to make sure that you're staying within the requirements of your standards. So this is not a triangular prism. Matter of fact, the set that I have doesn't even have a triangular prism. A triangular prism, similar to a rectangular prism, except three sides. This end, this base is a triangle instead of a square. So if you cut this right here, it would become a triangular prism. I don't have one of those to show you. This is a rectangular prism, this is a rectangular prism, and this cube is a special rectangular prism, just like our square is a special rectangle. So yes, kids do need to start learning that. This is a rectangular prism. It just happens to be a special one that has all the same size faces, so it's called a cube. So that's really important. Another thing that's important is we have to have a variety of sizes so that we are reinforcing that size does not determine what the shape is, because size is not an attribute that we use to define the shape. The attributes are the number of faces, the number of vertices, the number of edges, straight or curved faces, how many faces and what shape are they. So we're making sure that we're using attributes that define the shape, not things like size, color, and orientation. But in order to do that, we have to use a variety of figures. Now, one last thing to talk about, and that's, my friend, the cone. The cone gets a bad rap because resources aren't sure what to do with it. So in our district, this is called a point. It is not called a vertex. We do not expect first graders to call this a vertex. Its technical name is an apex. We do not expect first graders to know that. We need them to know it's a point. So I want to show you why it's not a vertex. If I think about the definition of a vertex is where two or more edges meet. This has three edges that meet, and it's a vertex. It's a point, right? Where three edges meet. This has no edges to meet. If there are no edges to meet, it can't be a vertex. So we teach that this has one face and one point, not a face and a vertex. Okay? So let's make sure we're real clear on that. So that we are teaching that proper academic vocabulary and building that understanding. Now, we are also not teaching that the base means the bottom. I'm not worried about students being able to say this has 4 rectangular faces and 2 square bases. I just need them to know it has 4 rectangular faces. The ends, or 2 other faces, they can call it a base if they want to, are squares. But I'm not testing students on the difference between a face and a base in first grade. That's not our concern. So we want to make sure we're teaching them our standard, and our standard is identifying number and shape of faces, number of vertices, number of edges, straight or curved faces. So we can't have a curved face, but straight faces, or it's curved and it rolls. Okay? So I have not shown you the sphere yet. The sphere is part of our standard. So we're going to make sure when we talk about this, it has no edges, it has no faces, it has no vertices. This is the only one that has 0 of everything. Okay? If you have any questions on this standard or need more clarification, please let me know.